All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the newest Grant Connect webinar. Thanks so much for joining the Grant Connect team today. We're really excited to talk about how to identify and qualify funders today, which is an important and integral part of the prospect research phase of grant seeking. So we'll get started here. So we're going to start off today with a bit of an overview of the session. So we'll start off today's webinar with a bit of an introduction to the folks that we have here in the room. We'll jump into a little bit about Imagine Canada and the work that we do. And then from there, we'll dive right in. We'll start talking about how to find the right funders for your work. And that will tie into speaking a little bit around Grant Connect, which is Imagine Canada's signature fundraising research software. And then from there, we'll talk about identifying and qualifying funding prospects, what that looks like, best practices, some frameworks as well. And then we'll end off today's session with some questions that we'll take live on the air, I guess. And we'll just a little bit of housekeeping. We will be sending around these slides, recording of today's webinar, and any other resources that we mention in the webinar today for folks, likely sometime later this week. So definitely stay tuned. You'll receive all of that right to your inbox. So a bit of an introduction of who we've got in the room today. My name is Alex Price, and I'm the Manager of Partnerships at Imagine Canada. I'm constantly talking with charities across the country, listening to their issues and helping to create solutions. While I mostly focus on partnership development in my current role, a majority of my work at Imagine so far has been focused on our grant-seeking platform, Grant Connect, and on supporting our stakeholders and clients in the fundraising space. With me here today, I've got Stephen Baldwin, who's Grant Connect's product manager.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
And the newest member of the Grant Connect team, Charine Kwan, who's our outreach and engagement coordinator, bilingual.
Hi, everyone.
So that's the team that we've got in the room here today. Charine is operating the tech in today's session, and we'll be monitoring the chat box throughout the webinar. So if you have any questions, comments for us, please leave those in the chat box, and we hope to touch on some of those at the end of the session today. So for those of you who don't know us, Imagine Canada is a national charitable organization. We've got staff across sort of Eastern Canada here. We have our main office in Toronto. We've also got locations in Ottawa and Montreal. And really, we are about charities. All of our programs and resources that we offer here at Imagine Canada strengthen charities and their operations so that they can, in turn, really provide the best quality services that they can to their stakeholders and their communities. So a couple of the programs that we offer here at Imagine, we have our Partners in Change membership program for individuals and organizations that support our work. We have our 2 accreditation programs. Our Caring Company program is a community investment accreditation program. And if any of our standards program participants are on the line today, you'll know that the standards program is an accreditation program for charities that exhibit excellence in a number of different governance and capacity areas. And then, of course, Imagine is fairly well known for its public policy work and its research work. So our public policy team helps to ensure that legislation out of Ottawa has charitable interests at heart. And our research team really does play a critical role in knowledge dissemination within the sector. And of course, we also operate Grant Connect, which is actually one of Canada's oldest social enterprises. And we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes when we talk about how to find the right funders for your work. So in today's webinar, we'll basically be talking about how to find the right funders for your work and then how to identify and qualify the best ones to move forward with. Now, this may sound simple, but to do it effectively can often be a bit more complicated than a simple Google search. But that being said, of course, the tips, strategies, and frameworks that we cover in this session today will help set you up for success. And I really like this quote on the screen here from Aristotle, which I think frames our discussion really well. He says, "To give away money is an easy matter and in any man's power, but to decide to whom to give it and how large and when and for what purpose and how is neither in every man's power nor an easy matter." So how do you start? The first and most important step to finding the right funders for your work is to know exactly what you'll need. The foundation of all good prospect research is to start by mapping out your organization's various needs to determine both funding fit and priorities. So it sounds obvious, but it's often a step that is completely missed, and it's really instrumental in helping you to identify and qualify the best funding matches for all of your projects and programs and needs at your organization. And again, you can't know exactly what to ask for or how best to ask for it if you don't have that really holistic view of what your undoubtedly complex needs are. So when you're thinking about this mapping and understanding of needs, you can ask yourself questions like, what's the impact of our work? Who will be affected by our project? What's our budget? What's our timeline? How much do we need? Things like that are really good to know before even looking into, who is going to be able to provide us funding for what we need. So again, knowing the answers to questions like these will really help make your request for funding, a little more targeted and a little bit more strategic, because really by looking inward at your organization or your project and mapping out your needs, you'll be able to more effectively identify and qualify the best funders for your work. So one tool that you can use to help get you started with this sort of mapping of your needs is a tool that has been developed by the Imagine Canada Grant Connect team called the Mapping Your Needs Worksheet. And it's really designed to help you understand and map out your complex needs in relation to grant seeking. And it's a really great template that provides an outline, not only for prospect research strategy at your organization, but it also serves as a framework for proposal writing or for crafting your case for support. And we'll be sure, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar today, we'll be sure to include a digital version of this worksheet PDF for you when we send out the session materials so that you can use this for your own organization or share this around with your colleagues and coworkers as well. So now that you know what you need, you really want to focus on how to actually find the right funders for your work. So there's a lot of different avenues for finding great funding for your work, both free and paid. And there are some solid free resources that are available for you, which we'll kind of walk through a few of those, but paid services are definitely more robust and can help do pretty much a lot of the work for you. In terms of free resources, you can see some of those here on the screen. Some great avenues for you are always foundation, government, or corporate websites. So just some examples here. For example, we're based in Toronto, so I've included, for example, here, the Grants Ontario website, where they list all of their provincial grants for Ontario-based organizations. Community foundations are always a really great avenue to pursue, especially community foundations in your area. They typically have multiple funding streams that cover quite a diverse array of funding areas. Another good option for you in terms of the corporate side are always the 5 big banks. So RBC, CIBC, TD, BMO, and Scotia. They're some of the 5 biggest funders for charities and nonprofits in Canada. And I always encourage folks to check those websites there when you can for any new funding opportunities that might align with your work. Charity Village has a pretty good funder directory that they host on their website that lists foundations and has a bit of information on areas that they give to. And then a great opportunity for you is to take a look at annual reports of like-minded organizations. So if you can think of an organization that operates in a similar space as you, or perhaps a quote-unquote competitor, it's always great to take a look at who's funded that organization, because it almost acts for you like a prospect list for your own team and your own needs at your organization. However, even though there are these free resources, they're generally limited and they do require a significant amount of time to work through. And this is really due to a lack of resource centrality, which essentially brings us into talking about paid resources or fundraising research platforms like Grant Connect, which really can help do quite a bit of the work for you in this process. So to give you some context on how critical a fundraising tool like Grant Connect can be, let's take a look at the statistic on the screen here. And when I found this out, it was very shocking to me, having come from a grant writing and a fundraising background, to find out that just below 30% of Canadian grant-making foundations actually have a website or online presence. So it's a bit shocking that about 70% of the grant-making foundations in Canada that exist don't have somewhere online that simply lists contact information or giving interest. So it really does show you the utility and the strength of a tool like Grant Connect to really be able to provide you with enriched information on funders so that you and your teams have all the information and resources that you need to approach funders successfully. Which brings us to Grant Connect. As I mentioned, there's quite a number of fundraising research platforms out there, both free and paid on the Canadian market, but Grant Connect, which is Imagine Canada's signature fundraising research platform, it's the only platform on the Canadian market that's charity owned and operated. And it's one of our main services that we offer here at Imagine to help build the sector's capacity to succeed. So not only do we have, prospect research tools and an all-in-one solution for fundraising research, we're used by thousands of charities across the country to find new prospects and win grants. And our multiple data sources are compiled by a team of in-house researchers who all have fundraising experience, and they really know the type of information that you guys are looking for in a platform like this. And at the bottom of the screen here, you can see really a breakdown of the funding opportunities that we list for folks in Grant Connect. So over 11,000 Canadian foundations, 560 plus corporate giving programs. The Grant Connect platform actually tracks all major corporate community investment programs in Canada. 370 plus government grant programs. Interestingly enough, over 120 American foundations that will support Canadian organizations and operations, and 200 or more other grant opportunities. Most of these are, for example, grant-making charities that operate in a similar fashion to foundations and in the way that they give out grants, but they are sort of traditional registered charities in that sense. So Grant Connect can give you the information, the data that you need to not only cut down on the time it takes to do your prospecting, but it can also help you make more accurate and successful quests for funding. And really, because our mission is to support the charitable sector, we have a number of great features associated with Grant Connect. We're really pleased and proud to offer special discounted pricing for small and medium-sized organizations, really easy to use relationship management tools to track your work. And you're really able to search over 125 million grant records in the system, which total over $41 billion in giving. So throughout today's webinar, what I'll do is I'll actually show you ways that you can use the data and information in Grant Connect to identify and qualify great funders for your work. And a really pro tip for any of those organizations that are on the line today, from maybe small organizations, grassroots groups, maybe nonprofits that really don't have budget to pay for a yearly or even a monthly subscription to Grant Connect. We offer a free limited access to the platform across the country via some of our licensed community partners. It's called our community edition of Grant Connect. It is slightly limited in that some of our additional features like our pipeline, which is our relationship management tool, they are limited in the community edition, but you're still able to access all of the search functionality and all of the profile information on the tens of thousands of funders that we have in the software. And again, we've really created this program to make the tool as accessible as possible to organizations across the country that really just can't afford a full subscription. And on the screen here, you can see just a couple of examples of some of our many community partners across the country, everyone from libraries to resource centers to universities and colleges provide access to their patrons and their students so that folks can access the Grant Connect software for free. So definitely check that out if it's of interest. So now that we've talked about, understanding your needs and how to actually find the funders to apply to, let's jump into the nitty-gritty of how to actually identify and qualify the right funders for your work. So what we're going to do in the next section here is really dive into some prospect research best practices and frameworks that hopefully will set you up for success, not only within the system, but also in the entire sort of prospect research or grant seeking process for you and your team at your organization. So first off, what you'll want to do is you'll want to start building a prospect list. And the first thing you'll need to do is to identify who some possible prospects could be. So what makes a good prospect? A good prospect generally has an interest in the work of your organization, the capacity to provide you with the support that you need, and ideally has some sort of connection or some sort of linkage to your organization. And here on this screen, you can see that the way that we can identify a good prospect is through this LAI principle here. And so the three elements in the previous slide really do speak to a super important concept in prospect research known as the LAI principle. So the combination of these three things, or L, A, and I, will help you determine which funders are your quote unquote best match and who's most likely to provide you with funding. And it's really a great framework for structuring your search for funding. And a really great tip for this is that this framework can also be replicated in other fundraising areas, such as like your major donor portfolio, sponsorship. So it's really not just for grant seeking and does have that broader use at your organization and your fundraising team. And another tip to remember is that it's not essential that every single prospect follow this rule, as not every great prospect will have all three match up. But it really is a good goal to aim for, at least, because the combination of the three of these that you see on the screen here really will increase your likelihood. So let's dive in a bit more and actually take a look at what LA and I are. So what are LAI? Linkage refers to, as you see up at the top left here, a contact, a bridge, or a point of access to a potential funder. So think about, past giving history, relationship to an organization, etc. And ability, or I actually prefer to call it capacity, I find that defines that notion a little bit better, refers to the capability of a funder to give at a certain level. So, through your research, a funder is deemed to have sufficient funds to support at X level. And then interest, it's possibly the most important one. It really refers to the funder's understanding of and enthusiasm for your organization's mission and accomplishments. So how interested is the prospect in your organization, in your activities, in the type of support that you need? Because little interest in any of those areas is either going to result in a small gift or no gift at all. So as we dive a bit deeper, we can cover each of these areas, and I'll actually show you ways that you can ascertain this information in your research with a tool like Grant Connect. So linkage, what does that look like? So linkage is important because it really can help get your foot in the door, get your proposal to the top of the pile, and really get you that inside angle. So as you can see on the screen here, having an inside connection to a funder is extremely valuable. You'll want to look to your networks, so your own personal, professional networks and your organization's networks, to find possible connections to funders. So you're going to want to talk to board members and other volunteers. You can also talk to senior staff, involved major donors, or anyone that's really involved in the work that you do, because you never know what type of connections that they might have. We also recommend that you take a look at past funders as well, because really a positive funding experience in the past can greatly improve your chance of that foundation or that funder supporting your work again. And one big tip that we can leave you, and I'll sort of reiterate this throughout the session today, is to document and track all of these connections that you have as best as you can. Because, as it says here, a lack of tracking can lead to lost funding opportunities in the future. So you really want to make sure, especially if there's staff turnover or anything that might happen within your teams or within your departments, you really want to make sure that everyone is aware of where these linkages or these connections lie, so that, and if anything changes, you're not going to be lost and scrambling. So using data and tech to show you the linkage, we can see this here in practice. So when you're on Grant Connect and you're in the About section of a funder profile, right at the bottom, you can see our key contact list, which can help you quickly determine who you might have a connection to and help you uncover hidden linkages to the funder. So we're going to provide you, not only with board members, but we're also going to provide you with key officers or staff members that are really involved in the decision-making process. And now ability. So what is ability or capacity? It's really important because a funder won't grant your request if they can't feasibly support your need. So as you're building your prospect list, to help you determine the capacity of each funder, you're going to want to think of questions like these. So how large is their asset base? How large are their grants typically? How many organizations do they support each year, and how many grants are given out? Because the knowledge that a funder gives, 100 grants in a year versus 5 really will be helpful for you in determining the likelihood of receiving support from them. And again, large funders receive thousands of requests each year, and to efficiently handle these, some funders will develop strict policies for giving, including maximum grant size. So really having an insight onto their financial data is going to be extremely helpful for analyzing their capacity to give to you. So taking a look at what that looks like here in Grant Connect, again, using the About tab of the profile in the Grant Connect Delta platform, you're able to find a section called financial data, which is right at the top right of that section. And you can see here from the red arrows that you're quickly and easily able to see a number of data points that will speak to a funder's ability. So just with the red arrows on the screen here, you can see things like assets. How many assets does the foundation have in the previous year? Or what are the total number of gifts that they gave out? You can see in 2018, this funder gave 311 gifts. And at the bottom of the screen, the final red arrow, those total gifts totaled almost $17 million. So you can clearly see that this funder has a really big capacity to give. If you were to come into a profile and you saw maybe really small asset base, revenues in the negative in a previous year, maybe a couple years in a row of 0 to maybe just a couple of gifts, it's a quick tell for you that this might not be a good option for you to pursue, simply because it looks like they're not really capable of giving at a particular level. And again, right from the top of the profile card on Grant Connect Delta, we have some great data points for you, where you can see things like gifts last year, median gift size, and median recipient size to help you benchmark your ask based on what others are doing in that space. Which brings us to the final component of LAI, which is interest. And as you evaluate your prospects, you're going to want to think about interest in relation to 3 main focus areas. And so these are kind of for me, the main 3 that are really important to gauge for interest. So the first one will be geographic region. Does the funder even support initiatives in your region? And if you're looking at corporate funders, does their company have, perhaps operations in your area? Lots of corporate funders are looking for to support organizations where their employees live and work. This is going to be really helpful for you because in Grant Connect, right at the top in the universal search bar, you can actually denote your geographic region to help weed out funding opportunities that just aren't available to you based on where you're located. Funding priorities as well. So, things like what's the funder's purpose? What's their mission statement or their funding interests? What impact population or issue or cause are they interested in? And how can you relate that to your work? And even things like who have they given to in the past? Have they funded organizations like yours? These are all really good things to think about here. And then finally, support preferences. Lots of funders have very strict guidelines around the type of support that they can provide. So you want to think about what type of support do you need? Will they fund ongoing costs, or is this just like a one-time project grant for our organization? And again, you're going to want to think about interest as super important because funders who have strict guidelines around all of these areas are specific to what, how, and where they can allocate funds. And to kind of show you again how you can ascertain this type of information in the Grant Connect software, the example that you see here is just from our gift analysis tab. As many of you, if you're users on the line, know this is probably what the screen that you can most associate with Grant Connect is our giving history or our CRA data. And in this example here, you can see in the breakdown who they gave to, for what cause, for where, how much, and then again, we provide you with that new data point of charity size at the far right there to help you benchmark, is this charity receiving funding? Are they a similar sized as mine in terms of annual revenue? And on the left here, we also have some data visualizations that really can highlight for you a funder's giving tendencies and a breakdown of their areas of focus, which is always really helpful when you're doing your prospect research. And again here, and this is again a screenshot right from the Programs tab of Grant Connect. And this is showing you more data points in the system that can show you things like the type of support that are offered under eligible costs. You can see on the left-hand side, types of support that this funder will for sure provide. And then on the right-hand side, a list of support types that the funder just absolutely will not provide you because of their certain policies or their restrictions. And then up at the top as well, you can see things like their grant range and their eligible regions to help you analyze that interest based on support preferences, your cause or what you're focused on, as well as your region. And then one tip that I can, again, give you is around tracking. So you're going to want to track and note these kinds of details during your prospect research phase, because it'll essentially help you be ready to not only compare these criteria when deciding who is best to approach, which is essentially the qualification process, which we'll get to in just a second here, but it's also going to really help you to build a targeted proposal or case for support, because you're essentially, what you're doing through that process is mapping your needs and comparing those to the preferences of the funder, which will kind of help to create that framework for building your proposal or case for support. And so this slide actually leads us really nicely into an overview of that qualification process. So let's take a look at that now. So now that you've found the right prospects to, or you've found a way to find funders, and now you've been able to identify some likely prospects, you're going to want to qualify them. And this step is going to help you make the best use of your resources so that you're not what we like to call here at Imagine Canada spray and pray, where you're not just sending out hundreds of almost like stock proposals to funders across the country and hoping that a couple of them stick. You're really going to be able to refine your time management and the resources that you and your teams are spending by being able to go through these processes here and really target the best possible matches for your work. So what do you do to qualify? So after identifying prospects and before you're going to decide who to solicit, you really want to apply the LAI criteria a lot more rigorously to your list of prospects. So what we encourage you to do is start off by casting a wide net during the identifying stage, finding anyone that possibly could have an interest in your work, and then refine that process further through qualification using LAI. And the qualifying stage is really where you determine the prospects with that strong likelihood of supporting your organization or your project. And it's at this phase in the process where you really are intending to move forward with a request or a proposal. And there really are quite a number of different frameworks that you can use to qualify funders. And many prospect researchers utilize whether it's a scoring system or a rating system. And I wanted to show you two examples of that today so that you might be able to incorporate some of these into practice. So in this example one here, which is kind of the framework that I personally used to use as a grant writer and as a fundraiser before my time here at Imagine Canada, was the ABC list framework. So what you can do is to look at your broad list of prospects and then assign each of them to list A, B, or C based on relevancy and their appropriateness to the current need. So, for example, prospects on list A would really have that connection, and it would be coupled with strong evidence for capacity to support your work and an interest in what you do or what your project is. And then prospects on list C, they don't really fulfill the current funding need, or maybe they kind of tick off one of those boxes a little bit, but they're definitely worth tracking for future projects because maybe they're just not a particular fit for this one need or this one program. And here on the second page, this is quite a bit more complex. A lot of prospect researchers, especially in major donor giving or individual donations, will use more complex scoring systems like this one here from AFP or the Association of Fundraising Professionals. I'm not going to walk through this full methodology for you here, but I did want to include a screenshot for you so that you are able to see the point system here and how that can also be an effective qualification method for your work, depending on the type of methodology that works best for you. So when we do send around the slides here, you will have access to see this framework from AFP to help you guide your LAI rating when you're doing any of your work. And again, this same type of qualification method, so whether you're using, for example, this list method in the first slide, or this more in-depth complex scoring system on the second slide, again, these qualification methods are really easily transferable to other areas of your fundraising portfolio. So whether it's your sponsors, your major donors, you really can use this framework for more than just your grant seeking. So now we'll dive into overlapping circles, and this kind of brings everything together and kind of summarizes everything that we've seen so far. So another way to frame your thinking around LAI, and again, this harkens back to that mapping your needs and really knowing not only what you need, but what funders are looking for in terms of a funding partner, is to look at overlapping circles. And I really like this quote from Kelly Megan, who is the president of the TR Megan Family Foundation. She says, "It's a question of identifying those overlapping circles, our capacity and our interests, your needs and your activities." So what you'll want to do is identify your circle and that of a funder to help you target funders that really mostly align with your work and with your specific need. So let's take a look at an example here. So sorry, the image on the screen is a bit fuzzy here, not sure what happened there. But let's take a look at the overlapping circles with this example here. So at the top left, you can see that the example charity is a Montreal-based mental health charity. And in this example, You can see that Corporation XYZ, which is the bottom right red bubble, and Foundation A, B, and C, which is the red bubble at the top right, they're completely different in terms of their funders. You can see up top, they're focused on seniors, mental health, accessibility, and Canada as their region. Corporation XYZ has a specific focus, as you can see, on Montreal as a region, and they're focused on social services, education, and community support. So they're completely different in terms of their focus and what they're looking to do in terms of their support. But as you can see, when you move around in the blue bubbles, when you move around the keywords there, you're essentially able to, it's clear that Foundation A, B, and C and Corporation XYZ are potentially both great prospects for this example charity. So what we're really encouraging you to do here is to expand and finesse your own circle to describe your charity in various ways, because again, your different projects and your programs are going to have very different needs. So you'll be able to find a wider number of funders to overlap circles with when you're able to do this exercise. And again, with a prospect research tool like Grant Connect, this overlapping exercise is essentially done quickly and easily for you with our powerful in-search filtering, where you can search for things like the type of support that you need, the type of population that your work is impacting, and cause terms that relate not only to your activities, but to your programs and your projects as well. So definitely encourage you to think about creating your own circle and to know your needs really well so that you can compare those to the priorities and abilities of any funders that you might come across in your work. And again, as you're doing your prospect research, as you're identifying, qualifying, the whole process, one last tip I can give you, and again, I've mentioned this a couple of times throughout the session today, really is to visualize and organize the entire gift solicitation process. Tracking, again, is really important because as you get started, you'll have funders that you're looking at, funders that you're qualifying, some that you're writing proposals for, others that you're waiting to hear back from. There might be some in that stewardship phase. So it really does get a bit crazy for you, and being able to track everything is going to be really, really helpful and will help cut down on the time that it takes to do this whole process. So again, to find success, you want to identify funders, qualify them, and then track the whole process as you go. This, again, is really helpful with regards to staff turnover, which, as many of us know in the charitable sector, is extremely frequent. So by being able to track everything that you're doing, if someone were to leave on your team and you rehire a new team member, they're not going to have any questions about, what's going on with all of our grant work. They're going to be able to hop right in and know exactly where you're at with all of the funders on your radar. And one suggestion that we have for folks in terms of this tracking is to use a prospect pipeline, as it's one of the great ways that you can track your grant seeking work. And I really like the visual of this image here, again, because you'll want to start with a really large number of prospects at that sort of identifying stage and refine through the pipeline process. So you're going to want to think of it kind of like a funnel, if that makes sense. And the framework for tracking that we just showed in the previous slide, which is that prospect pipeline, is replicated for you in Grant Connect's relationship management or work tracking tool, Pipeline, which is probably our most popular feature on Grant Connect, which now displays right on your homepage when you log into our new Grant Connect Delta platform. Again, really easy to use and helps you to keep a chronological handle on all of the funders that are on your radar, and really helps you to eliminate the need for any outside tracking, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet that gets shared around. It's really great because the pipeline is a collaborative tool on Grant Connect, so all the members of your team that do have access will be able to log in, see your pipeline, and know exactly where you're at with XYZ funders that you're approaching and that you're working with. So just before we move on to any questions, that's sort of the main content of the session today. I did want to provide folks with some useful links and resources that can help you to continue learning about the grant seeking process. So right up at the top, I've provided a link for folks that perhaps aren't already subscribers for Grant Connect. We did promote this webinar pretty broadly within our communications channels, not specifically to Grant Connect users. So for those who haven't signed up for the service yet, we definitely encourage you to click that link at the top of this slide once we send around the resources, or visit our website at grantconnect.ca, and you'll be able to sign up, find out more, look at some of our demo videos. And then below that, I've just got some really great resources for folks here. So probably the best resource for you in terms of prospect research and frameworks, best practices, suggestions, tips, and tricks is a book called Prospect Research in Canada, which was written in part by Tracy Church. Not sure if you're on the line today, Tracy, but this is really the one-stop shop for anything that you'll need to know about prospect research in Canada. Not just specific to grant writing. Again, you're going to have quite a bit in there around, major donors, sponsorship, and more. So we definitely encourage you to check that out. I believe the link there is to the page on Amazon. Another really great option for you here is the Fundraising Authority. It's a blog featuring how-to articles on prospecting, grant seeking, and more. So I've linked that for you here, and it has lots of really sort of one-pager blog posts on quite a number of different areas, particularly around prospect research and grant seeking. So in terms of Imagine Canada, we have two resources for you as well. We have our 360 blog, which includes a fundraising section. Imagine Canada staff and guest writers pretty frequently contribute to the blog on a number of different topics, from prospect research to fundraising to stewardship. So definitely encourage you to check that out. And then for anyone who's on the line today that isn't subscribed to Grant Seeker, which is actually our most subscribed newsletter at Imagine in Canada, we send that out once a month, and each iteration has a focus on a different area in the grant seeking or fundraising world, and features lots of great tips, tricks, resources to really help simplify you and your team's processes and operations. So we definitely encourage you to sign up today, and the link on this slide will take you right to that sign up form. So that pretty much brings us to the end of today's session. We look forward to doing more Grant Connect training webinars and content webinars like this for you in the future. Again, if you have particular areas of focus that you'd like us to perhaps touch on in terms of a fundraising or grant seeking webinar, we'd love to hear from you. So please send us any emails that you might have to grantconnect@imaginecanada.ca, and one of our staff would be happy to connect with you and bat some ideas back and forth around some suggestions for future topics. And with that, I thought I would flip it to those in the room that might have any questions about anything we've seen today, anything that we've covered in terms of the prospect research content, or if you have any questions about Grant Connect in general. We'd love to hear from you, so we'll give you just a couple of seconds to answer in the chat box, and I will flip it over to Shireen, who's monitoring our tech today, just to double check if we've got any questions from folks on the other line. Shireen?
Yeah, so we got a question here from Donna asking how much a subscription to Grant Connect is.
That's a great question. So again, we at Imagine Canada are thrilled to offer Grant Connect to Canadian organizations on a tiered pricing scheme. So we offer very significant discounts for small and medium-sized charities under $5 million. Prices can range quite drastically. For example, for a small-sized charity under $500,000 a year, you're essentially going to be looking at either $85 a month for a subscription, or all the way up to $5.99 for a one-year plan, and then they go up from there. So some of our plans can be, for example, medium-sized charities are about $999 a year, but we can definitely connect with you, Donna, to let you notice that. To let you know about our pricing and our plans. So we'll share some of that with you after the session today. We'll be sure to include a link to pricing and everything like that, so you guys are fully aware of all of our plans and our options in terms of our pricing and our fees. And do we have any other questions, Shireen?
Yeah, so earlier in the webinar, you had mentioned the Grant Connect access in some libraries. So Michelle was just asking if that's a free access or a paid access when you're accessing Grant Connect from libraries.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Michelle. So it is free. So again, because Imagine Canada's mission is to support the work of the charitable sector, we really have taken great care to ensure that resources like Grant Connect are still somehow available to folks if they just can't afford a plan on their own. So what we've done is we've partnered up with quite a number of organizations across Canada. So typically they're libraries, resource centers or universities and colleges, and they essentially license Grant Connect out so that, you know, all you really need, if it's a university, you just need that student card, or if it's at a public library, you just need a public library card, and you can access a community edition of Grant Connect completely free. As I mentioned, it is a slightly limited version, so excuse me, things like our pipeline feature, which we talked about, those are not available on the community edition simply because it is public facing. But by all means, all of the data and information that you would be able to find in a standard or like purchase subscription in terms of our search functionality and our profiles, so our information and data on funders, that is fully accessible for you at libraries and resource centers across the country. We tend to have partnerships with most the public library systems in most major cities, so Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, Calgary, and Winnipeg as well. So if you are interested in finding you know, the closest library to you, please send us an email to the email that you see on the screen, and we'd be happy to let you know where your closest option for access is. So thanks, Michelle. And I think we've got time perhaps for one more question. So let's flip that over to Shireen.
So Donna was wondering where our funding from Grant Connect services come from?
So where does your funding from Grant Connect services come from? If the question here is around where do we actually get funding to provide Grant Connect as a service, as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, Grant Connect is actually one of the oldest social enterprises in Canada. So all of the revenue that we make from the Grant Connect software, we're able to put directly back into the software itself to make developments and improvements and constantly be providing updated resources for you so that you have all the tools at your disposal to successfully approach funders for grant funding. And it looks like we might have time for one more question if there's anything else in the chat box here.
So there's one more question from Anya asking if it's possible among the potential funders in Grant Connect, if you can search by particular interest. So for example, foundations that support music organizations specifically. If you can speak a little bit more about searching with particular interests.
Sure, yeah, thanks Anya for the great question. So yes, 100%. You can pretty much use our cause filter in Grant Connect to search by a particular interest. So we can even get more in depth than, for example, just music in general. If there is, you know, like a particular instrument that your organization focuses on, or perhaps, you know, you're a local choir organization, we really can get pretty in depth and specific about the type of cause that you're looking to find funding for. And we have really easy to use in search filters that are all pre-suggested for you. So there's no guessing about, you know, what you have to be putting in. The system shows you what options there are in terms of funding. And yeah, you can search for, you know, very specific focus areas of your organization, so your cause, and then a number of other areas. So you can search within the in-search filtering, you can filter for the type of support that your organization is looking for, and the system will show you those funders that are going to give you that type of support. You can look for, you know, the specific populations that your work is impacting, and things like whether or not funders are even open to receiving requests for funding, and as well, you know, you can search for, you can filter for foundations, corporations, or government grant programs as well. So perhaps you're looking to diversify a particular area of your fundraising or your grant seeking portfolio. You can definitely target specific types of funders that are going to help you create that diversity within your portfolio. So lots of really good options for essentially describing your need to the system so that the system can create the search results for you that are not only going to be, you know, just a few so that you can actually qualify them, but they're going to be those best possible matches for the funding that you're looking for. So hopefully that answers your question there, Anya. So I think that is all the time that we've got for today. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us this afternoon. And thank you so much for your great questions and your comments in the chat box today. We wish you all the best of luck with your grant seeking endeavors and hope to see you again on a future webinar soon. Again, if you have any questions after the webinar, please email us at the email address that you see on screen here. And like Shireen and I mentioned, we will be sending out the session materials for folks sometime later this week. So please stay tuned for that. You'll get all of that right to your inbox. Thanks so much to everyone, and happy fundraising.